Good morning. We are going to start because we are obliged by the event to leave the room in exactly 1 hour, as you know the rules. So good morning and welcome. And thank you for being with us both in this room, but also a lot of people online on WebEx for this important event on strengthening international accountability regarding violence against children in armed conflict, a subject that is very much in the news, very much in the spirit of these days, unfortunately, I would say. But before that, I would like to thank all our sponsors, the group of friends on children in armed conflict who is supporting this event. Also the working group on children in armed conflict of Child Rights Connect, which myself as Director of Defense for Children International, I'm convening. Also thanking all the sponsors, the other sponsors, including the Canton of Geneva and the RAFT Foundations. Directly to the subject, because we have a very distinguished panel, which I'm going to present you, but we have to listen to them, but just give in a few words the context. We know that over 440 million children live in conflict areas around the world. In only 2022, 25,100 grave violations against children have been verified by the UN in 2022. And unfortunately, the figures in 2023 are going to exceed highly, including the basic right, the right to life for children. And we know that. We need to react. We need to do things differently. That's a bit the spirit of this event. This change of mindset includes, I start from us, civil society, NGOs, member states, UN bodies, mandates, procedures, and stakeholders. We cannot continue business as usual. This is a bit the starting point. And then what is the objective? So the objective is that in 55 minutes, so it's very ambitious, remaining, we need to focus on solutions. So propose, encourage the development of new and concrete ways to our recommendations to strengthen accountability. And in this, we want to highlight the link between accountability and then protection and prevention of future gross violations. This is something very important that I think through all the intervention you will feel it. Without just a logistical and housekeeping from the UN, that a reminder that the participants do not have the right to take pictures. This is the UN rule, and I had to say it. And without any further delay, I'm honored to give the floor to the Ambassador of Belgium on behalf of the group of friends.
Well, thank you very much, Alex. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning for this event, which is, as Alex just said, I think very timely, very timely. So congratulations for taking this initiative. And yes, as you know, every day we see on the news how children are victims of conflict in different parts of the world, and with seamless impunity. Of course, the risk is that one could think that the rules that we have developed over the year and which are there, we have this legal framework, but one could think that the rules are meaningless because they are not respected, they are not enforced. And so that's why I think it's extremely important, as you said, Alex, we have to react to this situation. We have to resist this way of thinking, and we have to show, well, we have to talk about accountability, but we of course also have to act. We have to work towards accountability and justice for crimes committed against children. And we have to renew our collective commitment to do that all together. And I think it's a fantastic panel that we have around the podium here with, you know, very important actors in different areas, but all, I think, contributing to this goal. And of course, we know accountability is not easy. It's very difficult. There are a lot of challenges, and I just mention a few perhaps, but I'm sure panelists will elaborate more on that. First, the difficulty of establishing the facts. I mean, there are reporting mechanisms, but sometimes they are not perhaps enough or inadequate. The difficulty of establishing responsibility. Difficulty of gathering evidence to support it. Then, of course, the complexities of conflict, sometimes with multiple actors. Obviously, the lack of resources. We all know that. The access of justice, which sometimes is not easy. And ultimately, political will. And there we come back to what we were saying. It's so important to have this political will and really to harness it. But I would like also to highlight perhaps another dimension of accountability, which may be sometimes overlooked. It's the importance of accountability for the victims. Because it's when there is an accountability process that victims can feel they are recognized as victims. And that's the point of departure for them to start reconstructing themselves and their lives. And because we live in a world of adults, sometimes we tend to forget that this is true also for children, perhaps even more so. And that's why it's so important, I think, to put victims at the center of all accountability efforts, including for children. And there are challenges, of course, because we also have to be cautious not to re-traumatize the children in the process by having, I don't know, repeated investigations, questioning, the way if there is a trial, how to handle the children. I mean, it's so complex, but so important as well. So with that, I think I will give the floor to the panelists, the prestigious panelists we have today. I'm sure we'll cover all these aspects. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. And I think, again, I want to thank the group of friends for the support. And your own leadership also, because having been in New York and in Geneva, you are the symbol of this link that we need to make and not the separation between mandates and the ocean in the middle. Without delay, I have the pleasure to give the floor to Professor Gamba, the Special Representative of the Secretary General on Children and Armed Conflict. As the subject of our workshop today is in the core of your mandate, I wanted to ask you, what are the mechanisms available to your mandate regarding to hold perpetrators of violence against children accountable and ensure access to justice to child victims? And how can they be reinforced? Because we can always do better. That's a bit for everybody.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much. I think the long and the short is I think we stand and we start from the point of view of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. So you talk about the tools we have available, but I think all of our tools are really under that big umbrella of the Convention. And so I think it's important that we understand that this year marks the 35th anniversary of the Convention. It did lay the strongest foundations upon which we have been building, both in the Security Council resolutions and in the General Assembly resolutions that led to my office being created, and for the work that we undertake on monitoring, reporting, engaging, and trying to prevent violations against children. I think here one of the tools we use the most is the adoption of the optional protocol on the involvement of children in armed conflict, which was really reinforced with the global consensus that children have no place in war. So I think the persistent lack of accountability for violations committed against children continues to undermine every long-term peace and stability process. Perhaps we should widen that discussion to say we need to engage all member states of the United Nations to speedily implement the Convention of the Rights of the Child and domesticate it in their national legislation, including through criminalizing the 6 grave violations. This will really assist greatly in trying to put in place a standard that everyone can agree. Now, the UN Security Council has given special regard to the identification of 6 grave violations. That doesn't mean that there's not more types of violations, but these are the 6 identified by the Security Council. And this forms the basis of what we call the architecture of the Council in protecting children during war. The UN mandated monitoring and reporting mechanism feeds into this framework. So the framework is based on 13 Security Council resolutions. Those 13 resolutions, each one provides us with a tool or the definition of a violation. So the 6 grave violations are 6 resolutions of the Security Council, and the monitoring and reporting mechanism is also a resolution of the Security Council. In this specific tool that was given to us, the monitor and reporting mechanism, the object was to gather data on grave violations against children for reporting in every 3 months. We report to the Security Council Working Group on Children and Armed Conflict, and once a year there is an annual report to the Security Council that the Secretary General prepares. An important goal of the monitoring and reporting mechanism is to hold parties to armed conflicts accountable for grave violations they commit against children, including by listing them in the annexes to the annual report of the Secretary General. The Security Council has also asked listed parties to sign with the United Nations action plans to implement concrete and time-bound measures to end and prevent grave violations. So the object of the monitoring and reporting mechanism is to identify who are the perpetrators of different types of violations. The second object of that tool is to engage those same violators and convince them to change behavior through the signature of a joint action plan to cease that violation, which is joined with the UN so that we can verify, have access, and also provide technical assistance to be able to carry it out. More recently, the mandate in the year 2018 added another Security Council resolution that for us is a very important tool, is Security Council Resolution 2427 of 2018 that has mandated us to also engage in the prevention of grave violations and also to work with regional organizations or from a regional standpoint to generate regional action plans that are for prevention of violations. Since the creation of the mandate, over 40 action plans have been signed with parties to conflict to end violations, in which a number of measures are included to promote accountability. Every single of the action plans we sign, or we convince parties to conflict to sign, include accountability. Prevention plans have been developed as well, particularly last year alone in the Philippines and in Ukraine, both of which do include accountability. In addition, many countries have criminalized the 6 grave violations by updating their child laws and have endorsed political commitments such as the Paris Principles, the Vancouver Principles, and the Safe Schools Declaration, which they then have to implement. Furthermore, my office and our partners continue encouraging accountability efforts by supporting national justice mechanisms. This is our front line for accountability. For example, in Colombia, where national justice authorities are in the process of investigating and prosecuting alleged crimes against children perpetrated during the conflict. These successes should, however, not let us forget the reality of today. Some harmful trends and patterns have taken a worrying hold, as reflected by the continued high numbers of grave violations against children mentioned by my colleague here. And I am particularly concerned over the relapse into the escalation of conflicts in recent years, marked by serious violations of international human rights and humanitarian law. While signatures, ratifications, and endorsements of national and international frameworks are commendable first steps, they are first steps, and they do not have much meaning for children if they are not systematically translated into concrete actions, as was mentioned here as well. To end this cycle of violence faced by conflict-affected children, we must ensure that the perpetrators of these crimes are held accountable. And this includes speedily domesticating the Convention on the Rights of the Child into national law, systematically criminalizing child rights violations in domestic legislation, ensuring that obligations under international human rights and humanitarian law are upheld, investigating and prosecuting those who are responsible for child rights abuses, and removing all barriers for children to access justice, including to facilitate their active role in the judicial process, which obviously has also to be protected. We do also have as a tool a very good engagement with different other bodies, which we have a good understanding. I think we have a very good understanding with the Office of the Prosecutor in the ICC, and the collaboration with the ICC has been ongoing since 2017, at least for me. The new policy on children adopted by the Office of the Prosecutor in 2023 will enhance the attention, capacity, and competence to address and prioritize crimes that are against children. And I also welcome the Committee on the Rights of the Child's recent decision to draft a general comment on children's rights to access to justice and effective remedies. In this process, my office will also be engaging at that point in time. Because of lack of time, I stop there.
Thank you so much, Virginia, and I'm sure we will come back because there are also questions from the public. Now I have the pleasure to give the floor to Najat Malamjit, the Special Representative of the Secretary General on Violence Against Children. And I wanted to ask you, Najat, how does your mandate can contribute to accountability on violence against children in the context of armed conflict, and how your mandate is complementary to the one of Virginia on CAC?
Thank you, Alex. I will try to. It's working?
Yes.
Okay. Strengthening international accountability for violence against children in armed conflicts is becoming more relevant than ever, because it seems that we are facing more and more wars that are dedicatedly and targeting children, and children are paying a huge tribute. And as you highlight, millions and millions of children are living or fleeing, conflict zone. And an unprecedented number of children are forcibly displaced. And what's important regarding my mandate, who is a global advocacy mandate dealing with all forms of violence in all settings, is also the continuum of violence before, during, and after conflict. And this is really important, and we are working closely regarding that, because you know that children who were already vulnerable prior to conflict, and children in conflicts, and children fleeing within and across countries are at the front line, and this we saw it in many places. And also because this continuum of violence, encompasses multiple forms of violence. The 6 grave violations that are interlinked with other forms: gender-based, forced labor, trafficking, smuggling, child marriage, enrollment in armed and criminal groups, and deprivation of liberty. And I just want to use this opportunity to tell that accountability is needed more than ever, and it has not to be only a slogan, because just think about, children, because the unprecedented harm, and sufferings experienced by millions of children living in and fleeing conflict zone in many regions, such in Myanmar, Yemen, South Sudan, Ukraine, Syria, among others. And more current example is the situation in Gaza, which has rightly been called as a graveyard for thousands of children and a living hell for many more. And just we need to never forget that accountability is also because children are dying, children are injured, children are separated from their family, children are becoming orphans, children are continuing to live in camps and informal settlement for years and years. Children are ending on streets, and many of them are deprived of their liberties, their basic needs, and have no easy access to humanitarian aid and protective measures. And we know that it will have a long-lasting impact on their well-being and mental health and their development. So just to let you know how we are working together, we are working closely with other SRSG, and especially Virginia, and other UN agencies and humanitarian partners, because it's important to address the interlinked, aspect of all this violence and all the driver. And just to give you very few examples, what is important is using the fact that I am doing country visit meeting, having bilateral meeting, presenting, in GA and in Human Rights Council, using it for a strong moment of advocacy, mobilizing and influencing policymakers really to strengthen the accountability and the protective measure for children and allow them, as was highlighted by the ambassador, to make sure that they have access to child-sensitive complaint mechanisms, even in time of war, that are really easily accessible to all children and really have access to justice and remedies. And accountability, and I can tell you as pediatrician, when you are holding states and individual, accountable, those who are violating human rights and violating, international law, it's part of the healing process. This is very, very important. It's not only about paper resolution and the waiting and waiting. It's really about lives. This made me having many concerns regarding that. I am not going to tell you all what I am doing because it will be crazy. But what is important also is all the regular exchange we have at headquarter level, but also with the UN country team, with the humanitarian, organization, with civil society organization, with national human rights institutions, because they need to be strengthened also, and to make, to play this role of monitoring, to advocate, for more and more and more advocacy, more and more accountability, and completing the work. This is very important. We are not through sharing information, strong message, and targeting, in policy influencing, targeting the states who are the most reluctant really to be accountable. And this is a big challenge, but we have no, and I want to end by one thing that is important. It's really, for me, the most important actor are children themselves. I am meeting them regularly, in all my country visits, in my bilateral meeting, children who are in humanitarian setting, children who are in camps, children who are deprived of liberty, working with the Commission of Inquiry on Syria and the other regarding the repatriation of children in the camps, because you have all these these grave violations that continue occurring after, conflict. And we need to be very, very careful regarding that. And I just want to conclude, to avoid many times. Yes, we are promoting, the ratification of all these conventions, the Child Rights Convention, pushing for, the respect of violation of respect of human rights and international law. But I would just want to, how we need to deal differently, because currently what we are seeing, we have double standards. We are not applying the same system for all people. Something is going wrong. And this signal we are sending that the lives of children, dependently of their origin, have not the same cost. And we have to be very careful regarding that. So we need really to strengthen it and to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Najat. Food for thought and discussion further. But I think there are very important points that were raised. Now, when we are speaking about child rights, everybody is looking at the Committee on the Rights of the Child. And today we have the pleasure to have the chair of the committee, Skelton, who, independently of the chair, she has been a child rights defender for whole life, and for us, civil society, a great support. They have many questions because they came also questions from the public, the submitted questions to you. So first of all, I wanted to ask you, what is the UNCRC role in achieving accountability, in terms of children armed conflict? Can you give us some concrete examples on how you deal with it? And then what recommendation can you make in order to support how the UNCRC can work further accountability and intensify this? It was also a question from the public regarding the new General Comment 27. If there will be, the question was if there will be something touching upon children armed conflict and accountability and, it's justice for children and effective remedies. So if there will be effective remedies also on CAC. And a last question, sorry, too many questions, that if there is something to do between the reporting of the CRC and what Virginia mentioned, the MRM, they do all this monitoring and reporting, and how this reporting can communicate and build to among each other. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alex, and thank you for inviting me to be on this panel. the word mandate can sometimes feel like quite a restriction. And I think I can speak on behalf of the Committee on the Rights of the Child when I say that during the last year, we have found it very frustrating that we have a rather limited mandate. But I believe that we are using the mandate that we have as imaginatively as we can to try to promote accountability on this issue. Firstly, of course, our mandate derives from the convention itself, and Article 38 is really a very unusual provision because of the way in which it is broad in its expansiveness, because it's not only international human rights law, but also includes international humanitarian law, so that wherever children are in armed conflicts, both are at play. And this is the only place in the convention where there is that kind of expanding of accountability, I would say, and responsibility for states, and also it increases our monitoring role. Of course, we also have the optional protocol on the involvement of children in armed conflict. That hasn't quite reached the same number of ratifications. It's sitting at 173, and ratifications are slow. But we've also noticed that states parties are somewhat unclear about their obligations. Of course, it is rather narrow in its scope. It focuses on recruitment. And as Virginia has said, you know, the 6 grave violations, that's just one of the 6 grave violations. But then we go back to the convention because all the other grave violations are included under the convention. So we certainly have the full range, and we do indeed ask states parties about all of those. I think it's interesting that states don't know. If they're not in an armed conflict, they sometimes think that they don't need to report, don't need to ratify, don't need to report. So, for example, when South Africa recently came to the committee, they engaged in an open dialogue about that with the committee. They said, but do we have to report under OPIC when we're not at war? And it's kind of interesting that they asked the question because they are demonstrating that the boundaries of accountability are actually very stretched, right? Because who can call out violations is states that see that there is a responsibility to do so. And of course, every country could be receiving children from neighboring states, from the continent, who coming from situations of armed conflict. So the committee has been working on its questions that we ask under OPIC so that we can sort of better guide states on that as well. In terms of reporting under the state parties' obligations and the review process, in January this year, we reviewed Russia, the Russian Federation, and in there we pointed out Russia's obligations under the convention, and that these apply not only in the Russian Federation, but also in all of the areas under which they have effective control. And this is a very important aspect as well, that expanding of boundaries and extraterritorial jurisdiction. And so we did ask the committee about all of those territories. So the committee noted that it had several grave concerns, including concerns related to the 6 particularly egregious violations against children in armed conflicts enumerated by the Security Council. So that's part of, in answer to one of your questions, was how do we connect up? Well, that's how. Through reviews, we draw attention to that. For instance, we can account we pointed out the sexual violence against children perpetrated by armed forces, attacks on hospitals and schools, and the reports that thousands of children have been forcibly transferred from Russia to Ukraine. We also made linkages with other accountability mechanisms because we asked the state party to take several measures, including cooperating with the United Nations Independent Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine and the International Criminal Court's investigation. So we connected the dots in that regard. The State of Israel was also on the list of states to be reviewed during the committee's 95th session, but unfortunately the Israeli government decided to postpone until September this year. The committee then, in our press conference where we were reporting on the session, also took the opportunity to make a statement about our concerns and to raise the awareness of the situation of children in Gaza, We had already made 2 statements in this regard, and we've been reiterating our calls for ceasefire and a return to the basics of humanitarian law. So again, flagging that responsibility we have to also look out for humanitarian law under the convention. We have also continually talked about the need for the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages, in particular children and their caregivers. And we've also flagged the huge need for psychosocial support for all children affected by war in that region. So, of course, we also have the 3rd optional protocol under a communications procedure. There we've had important cases on the repatriation of children of foreign fighters in Syria. We had cases against France and Finland, where we have asked those states to repatriate children from that area. We've been following up on those cases, and we're actually are having a fairly satisfactory compliance with those orders. I know I'm under time pressure, so let me say then about our decision to have our next general comment on children's access to justice and effective remedies. Yes, very definitely, this will include children in armed conflict. So we encourage everybody to please provide inputs to us. There will be a consultative process for states and, of course, civil society and the involvement of children themselves. Thank you. Back to you, Alex.
Thank you so much, Anne. Again, we will come back to you, I think, with further questions. Now I have the pleasure to give the floor to my dear colleague, Aurélie Lamazière from Save the Children. Aurélie is a senior program manager, and she's a specialist on accountability. And the first question is very much related also to the agenda of this Human Rights Council, because I wanted to ask her, how can the Secretary General guidance note on mainstreaming be operationalized to advance accountability for child rights violations? And a second question would be for you, how can we strengthen the approach to documenting and investigating child rights violation in situation of armed conflict? And you can refer also to armed conflicts. We have so many, unfortunately, right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex, and thank you really to DCI for convening this event and this important discussion. And I'm really honored to be a part of such a distinguished panel. It's really like a great opportunity to discuss how we can collectively support this agenda. While acknowledging the development of a more protective apparatus over the last 20 years, I think we're all recognizing here that children continue to be disproportionately affected and exposed to serious violations and crime. And accountability for those violations is really essential for 3 reasons, and I will echo the ambassador. I mean, the first one is really like accountability allowed to acknowledge the wrongs that are done to children. It helps prevent future violation, and it's about rebuilding a society based on the rule of law. So we really need to involve children fully into those efforts. We know that when it comes to documentation and investigation, children's violation, in spite of course, great efforts, but generally, those violations are still under-reported, under-investigated, and maybe under-prosecuted. I'm also, just to clarify, I'm referring here, I will refer later in my presentation on the documentation efforts from commissions of inquiry, fact-finding mission, or quasi-judicial mechanism, all the way to the International Criminal Court. So we know that these documentation efforts remain too often adult-centric. We know that children don't have enough access to accountability mechanism, and in return, these accountability mechanisms do not have enough access to children to get the full scope of the abuses that they're faced. We know that the obstacles are multiple. I just want to name a few. There is an absence of specific strategy that are not enough developed. to document and investigate fully those violations and crimes. There is a shortage of expertise overall. There is also like a lack of alternative to interviewing children. While we know that there is plenty of other ways where we can already capture how children are impacted without directly interviewing them. However, I just want to be optimistic here and recognizing that we are making progress in addressing this challenge. And there are several leverage points, initiatives and tools that are allowing us to advance justice. So it's really an encouragement. I'm just going to name a few of these efforts that need to be further supported, encouraged by everyone. I just want to acknowledge that there is a lot of efforts that being done by the mechanism themselves that I've indicated to systematically report on a children's violation. We see that in the latest report that are discussed at the HRC. Also the International Criminal Court has released last year and end of last year a new policy on children. This is also or a revised policy on children. It's quite a significant milestone on how the court will increase its own focus on crimes affecting children. And of course, we really welcome this the new general comments of the CRC, which will provide great opportunity to include those accountability efforts for children impacted by armed conflict. The Secretary General guidance notes that is really also a great opportunity to push for the inclusion of a child rights approach in accountability mechanism. We heard yesterday the High Commissioner announcing the release of OHCHR's report on child rights mainstreaming, and they're really like key areas that member states and all of us should support to translate this recommendation into action. So we need to really push or continue pushing for the inclusion of in resolution of strong language to recognize the need to document and report on children's violation. That includes putting this in the mandate of new or renewed mechanism and include child dedicated expertise. It does make a difference to have child rights experts who are part of those efforts. We need to have, of course, the political support from member states, and we need to ensure that there is a broad commitment to adopt that child rights approach by everyone, from the senior leadership all the way to the investigators, including those who are not, or especially those who are not non-child rights experts, to push for that mainstreaming to happen. To address the gap in methodological guidance, let me just highlight two things. Save the Children has developed a guiding framework with a recap very simply of principles, 6 important principles that should be followed to ensure that we are adopting that child rights approach at all stages of the documentation efforts. I'll be very happy to share this if you're interested. I'm also just announcing that we've developed a new learning module together with Justice Rapid Response on those encouraging efforts to integrate a child rights approach, to mainstream that child rights approach, again, at all stages of the documentation. Just a few recommendations to ensure that we can advance accountability for children. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aurélie, and thank you in particular for pointing on positive practices, which we need to reinforce and to have some optimism, because it's difficult sometimes. Before giving the floor to our last speaker, who is Khaled Kouzma, President of the Defense for Children International Movement and Director of DCI Palestine, I would like to, for all of us to listen a voice from the field. It's Dunya from Gaza. And just hear her voice. It's just 1 minute. It's very short.
لما ضرب الصاروخ الثاني علينا صحيت لقيت كله حجار عرفت انه رجلي مقطورة لانه كان في دم وما كانش لما ضرب الصاروخ الثاني علينا صحيت لقيت كله حجار عرفت انه رجلي مقطورة لانه كان في دم وما كانش في إلي رجل لو كنت احركها ما كانتش تتحرك. إيه طبعا اللي استشهد اللي هم ماما بابا أخوي محمد وأختي دالي. حدا يطلع لي برا اللي هو يسفرني برا أي دولة إني أطلع برا بس عشان أركب رجلي وأصير أمشي عليها زي الناس يعني عشان أصير أمشي أطلع أنزل ألعب مع أخواتي. نفسي أصير دكتورة زي هدول الدكاترة اللي بعالجونا عشان برضو إحنا نعالج أطفالنا. أنا بدي إشي واحد بس إن نخلص الخير.
It's difficult. It was very short, but just to say that Dunya, as you saw, as any child in the world, had dreams. In particular, after what she lived, she wanted to become a doctor to help people. And she was, although she was already in a drama, losing her parents, she was still looking at the future and wanted to help the others. Unfortunately, Dunya is not with us anymore because a bomb blasted the hospital where she was hospitalized and killed there. So things like that, it's a small story, but there are hundreds of these every day. So with this background, Khaled, I wanted to ask you a few questions. So what is your assessment of the role of international mechanism? We heard a lot of things today in terms of accountability for violation of child rights in armed conflicts. How does the current state of accountability for gross child rights violations has an impact to the actual protection of child rights in accordance to the international standards? Thank you, Khaled.
Thank you, Alex. And of course, thanks to all the panelists, the speakers, that I respect them, all of them very much. And we worked together since years in order to reach the point of protection for all the children everywhere. Unfortunately, and also I would like to thank Alex for sharing the video because the video wakes me up because I was flying and feeling that I live in a heaven. There is accountability system, there is a human rights system, there is international law, but the video returned me back to the fact. The fact is, there is international law, there is accountability system, there is all the international human rights treaties, child rights treaties, and everyone can speak for hours on the protection system and the mechanism that we already have. But unfortunately, still, all these documents, I believe, and the efforts that still shared in this regard failed to save the life of Dunya while she was hospitalized inside the hospital. The hospital was bombed. I didn't hear any action from, unfortunately, from states and from most of those who are dealing with the human rights in the international level. Unfortunately, I'm not a diplomat. I'm direct to the point. So we live it, not we believe. We live it that there is double standard. There is black and white. We've been very much happy when we see the reaction of the international community in Ukraine. And we all in sympathy with what happened with the civilians in Ukraine. And as a Palestinian, we know more than anyone in the world what's the meaning being under attack, under aggression. But we'd like to see also, we believe that we deserve to see the same treatment and the same concern when it comes to the other places in the world, in particular now in Gaza. Since the Second World War, this is the first time that we are seeing that states are attacking, bombing houses, denying food, water, electricity. Who believe that since more than 5 months, people live without electricity? People live without food and without that. Are you following the news that how many times the Israeli army bombed the civilians who are waiting for the food supplier and the aid that came through coordination with the Israeli authorities? Just yesterday, more than 10 children killed and, of course, 100 may be injured in what called the Kuwait Square and the Naples Square. So more than 20 times. Follow the news about what is happening through UNRWA information and also the organizations who are in the field, Save the Children, UNICEF, and others. State Secretary General of the United Nations said clearly that Gaza is a graveyard for the children. So what is the action after that? Of course, we hear also UNICEF. The high-risk place in the world for the children is Gaza. You Save the Children. Compare the number of the killing of the children who are killed during the past 5 years in a few months is more than in Gaza in 2 months more than all those who killed around the world. So we are dreaming to see an accountability system in force. But of course, the problem is no political will. And this is our role as human rights defenders, as UN agencies, as everyone who can contribute to create the change, to stop the impunity, because already there is accountability, but accountability will never work with impunity. So those who are committing these crimes, they are live under full impunity. And unfortunately, lack of political will, the absence of political will is led to free hand to the soldiers, to the state, to do what they would like to do. And the result was, I don't know who can even manage the numbers of those who killed. We work in this field for more than 30 years. We usually document every single case of the children who've been seriously injured or the main violation, the sixth violation against. But now we have we couldn't even manage the number of the killing. While we are here now, during the 1 hour, I don't know how many children killed in Gaza. I don't know how many children are starving since there is no food, no water, no electricity. Sometimes ask me about right to education. Which kind of right to education in Gaza? Schools are almost now become shelters for the civilians, and more than 50% of the schools have been bombed. So children are in the streets and in the tents, and those who are not killed, they are injured. Those who are not injured, they are starving, looking for the food. So we have to wake up to know where we are now and where we will go. So this is, I believe, still there is a hope, and of course we will keep the hope to see a real action to stop the impunity, to stop them, to hold the criminals accountable. Without work in these two things, I believe that we will continue now in Gaza, in other place it will be again, and in other. So this is unfortunately our responsibility to raise the voice and to share all what we can do Of course, maybe Secretary General did something and the others did, but we have, I believe, to do what we can do in order to stop the genocide and then to work for the accountability again to ensure that what happened to the children in Gaza will never happen in any place in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Khaled. And I think this emphasized a little bit the link between accountability and protection. And in fact, there is a link. And when we are speaking about accountability, it's not for an academic effort. It's in order to prevent also future violations, gross violations in the future. Now, we have a few minutes for questions from the floor. And I think I have already Norway who requested from the floor, and also some others. So Norway, you have the floor for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you to DCI for taking this important initiative, and thank you very much to the distinguished panelists for their valuable recommendations. Cooperation is a priority for Norway on the CAC agenda, and we would like to underscore the importance of enhanced cooperation between all actors working with CAC on all levels. So what can we do? The SRSG CAC has underscored the importance of implementing international conventions and standards in domestic law, including criminalization of grave violations against children. Ending and preventing grave violations is the overarching goal for us all. Implementing the conclusions from the Security Council Working Group on CAC is a valuable tool to that end. If they're not implemented, they're not worth anything more than the paper they've written on. So as a former chair of the working group, it's a priority for Norway to contribute to their implementation. And one avenue to do that is through engagement in all the group of friends of CACs across regions, and we need support from other states to do so. The UPR process has been mentioned by many during this week. If states ask questions and make recommendations regarding CAC to other member states, we can ensure to keep the issue on the agenda for years. The same applies to the different treaty bodies. Here, civil society plays an important role through the shadow reporting. They can inform the different committees on important CAC aspects. The different SRSGs are key actors. The reports, etc., are crucial tools for the different treaty bodies and can be used to bring CAC up in reports and hearings. The treaty bodies are supposed to look to each other's concluding observations in their work. This is, however, often difficult due to heavy workloads and time constraints. And also because of lack of resources. We have heard that the work of the Committee on the Rights of the Child can be restrained because of lack of payments from member states. So we strongly urge all member states to make their payments without delay. And the cooperation between the different SRSGs is also crucial. So we're very happy to see you together here today, and we know that you're enhancing your cooperation. The member states must also ensure that protection of children is included in all mandates of the investigative mechanisms, peacekeeping missions, and so on and so further. And it must be followed up by sufficient funding in the Fifth Committee in New York. So member states also have a challenge to ensure better cooperation between their missions in Vienna, Geneva, and New York. Working in silos is history. Only if all actors join hands and work together in this important endeavor, we can improve the protection of children affected by armed conflict and ultimately contribute to end and prevent violations against children. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for this very important statement. And we need more champions like Norway, so the floor is open. I have also Malta requesting for the floor.
Thank you, and thank you for the very interesting presentation by all the panelists. It is indeed a very important subject. Very much in the same line as our Norwegian colleague just spoke. I mean, as the current chair of the working group on CAC in New York, we certainly do agree that children's rights are extremely important, and it is also important to mainstream children in our work. We also agree that there is a need to break down silos. Unfortunately, there is a lot of good work taking place in many different structures, but somehow they're not joined up most of the time. And that is a pity, and we understand, in our view at least, that is also a contributor to the lack of accountability. Taking advantage of the distinguished panel we have here today, perhaps you could also inform us better how these silos can be broken down. What can we do? For example, how can the work done by special procedures at OHCHR be also integrated in this process? Because there are issues there which are dealt with regarding children, which we believe would contribute to the overall breaking down of the silos and enhancing the system. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If there are no further, sorry. Okay, Ukraine and then Benoit.
And thank you for organizing such an important event on protection children all over the world. And we commend the work of the UN bodies in documenting human rights violations, including those against children in Ukraine. As you heard today, Russia's aggression against Ukraine has had a devastating impact on children's lives. And the abduction of children has been identified by the UN Secretary Council as one of 6 grave violations against children during armed conflict, while the forcible transfer or protected person is prohibited under the 4th Geneva Convention. That's why the realization of the joint Ukraine and UN preventive plan to prevent and stop grave violation of children's rights in Russia's armed aggression is also an important step in implementing Bring Kids Back UA, a comprehensive action plan developed at the initiative of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The plan unites the efforts of the Ukrainian authorities, pro-Asian governments, and international organizations for the return of Ukrainian children abducted by Russia to their homeland. And that's why, in alignment with the joint letter on forcible transfers and deportations of Ukrainian children, on behalf of the European Union member states and Ukraine, we call for all possible UN efforts to return Ukrainian children back home and to support steps to ensure accountability for those involved in these abuses. I thank you.
Thank you so much. And very briefly, also, we have another member of the Committee of the Rights of the Child, and then we'll give back the floor. We have only 2 minutes in total. So thank you, Benoit.
Yeah, thank you for giving me the floor, Benoit van Kersbeek, member of the Committee on the Rights of the Child. And I would like to stress what has been said, but it's very important, to call for the states to finance the system, because we are now in a crucial moment where all these accountability mechanisms that have been highlighted today are at risk of not being able to deliver. I mean, we already have a lot of difficulties to deliver, so financing the system is crucial, but also recalling the need for the states to ratify the existing mechanism. We don't have to invent many other mechanisms, but we should make sure that the existing mechanisms do work. My colleague Anne Skelton has recalled the importance also of the OPIC. OPIC, it's individual complaint, but also inquiries. And inquiries should take a very important role in this kind of context. We are talking about grave or systematic violation of children's rights, and the Committee on the Rights of the Child should be able to conduct its mandate in this regard in so many places, Ukraine, Gaza, but so many other places where those violations are happening in conjunction with other mechanisms that have been recalled. Thank you.
Thank you, Benoit. I go back to our panel. We have 30 seconds each to conclude. You can also respond. There was a question from Malta on silos, so you can include it in your 30 seconds. The ambassador.
Thank you. Well, yes, perhaps one point, because it was raised, the importance to indeed work together, break the silos, and for instance, use also special procedures, the investigation mechanism that are created by the Council of Human Rights. And I think there it is really upon us, diplomats working here. We are the ones who draft the resolutions, after all, and it's up to us to include in the text of the resolution, maybe 1 or 2 sentences about children, and because that gives then the mandate to the mechanism to work also on this.
Thank you. Virginia?
I think the answer is very clear to all of the questions, which is, I think we all, when I mean we all, is everyone in this room, but also everyone in the world, everyone should become a child protection expert. I think we don't understand how to protect children from violence, particularly in armed conflict. We don't know how to prevent violations against them. We certainly are not interested in providing reintegration support, reparations to children to get on with their lives in a post-conflict situation. So we need to become child protection experts, all of us. To do that, let's work together. I think capacity building and training is fundamental. We're putting a free CAC primer online for anyone that wants to do it at their own space and their own pace as well, to be able to add to this.
Thank you, Virginia. Najat, 15 seconds, because we have to leave.
To be very quick regarding, the cooperation, it's already existing. Just to respond to Malta, we are working closely with special procedure, with all people who are involved. The problem is not siloed approach. It's a problem once we work together and we decide to do is who is going to follow up, to implement, to monitor. And here we come back again to the lack of resources, but also as highlighted by the ambassador regarding it's not another resolution telling you we encourage you to do it within your existing resources when you are 11 people. And so sorry, I think you have, as diplomats, you have a big responsibility regarding how we strengthen and how we can become all of us accountable. But you have also another big responsibility is how we can currently become united, because all of you are telling it's unacceptable. But I think also the resolution taken, for, ceasefire, for many things, for stopping, is taken by states. So I think you have 2 big responsibilities here.
Thank you, Anne.
I echo what everyone else has said, and I would also say let us focus as well on the Pact for the Future and see what we can make sure we include in there on this issue as well, to make sure that we work in an integrated way going forward as well.
Aurélie?
Thank you. Echoing all these recommendations and just, stressing the added value of bringing all the mechanisms also together. Everyone has strength and limitation because of mandates, but the combination of all of that makes it more impactful, hopefully, for the children affected by armed conflict.
Thank you so much. Alan?
Thank you very much. Even I'm one of the panelists, but I would like to stress that, yes, now the international system, the UN system is an artist who failed to save the life of Dunya, who failed to save the life of a child, to provide the child with a cup of water to drink before he died, or a piece of bread to keep alive. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you.